back again. Box for the mail call is still sitting here, and you can see the stuff up there from the mail call. The Real Railroads, Episode 9, is going to be on the Arcade Attica. Is this gonna... Yes, there we go. The Arcade Attica of today is a shadow of what it used to be, running between its namesake villages. It now runs between Arcade in the southwest of Wyoming County, New York, up to Rysdorf's feed, and only runs that far as needed, usually once per week. They run excursion trains between Arcade and Couriers Saturday and Sunday twice a day during the tourist season. The history of the Arcade Attica started in 1836, when the Attica and Sheldon Railroad was proposed, likely to run between the village of Attica, southwest, to the hamlet of Sheldon. Nothing ever came of this proposal, and it was abandoned before construction ever started. The next attempt was made by the Attica and Allegheny Valley Railroad, which incorporated in 1852 to build a 3-foot narrow-gauge line from the village of Attica south through Arcade and on down to the Pennsylvania state line. In 1853, they graded much of the route between Attica and Arcade, but work halted in 1855, and the line was sold at foreclosure on February 2, 1856. Next, the Attica and Arcade Railroad purchased the route and resumed construction, planning to complete the route by October 1, 1876. The company went bankrupt in 1873. Almost 4 years later, on April 5, 1880, the Tonawanda Valley Railroad was incorporated with support from the Erie Railroad. They planned to build 24 miles connecting Attica and Couriers with Sardinia, where the Buffalo, New York, and Pennsylvania Railroad was located. The first train ran on September 11, 1880, but only went as far as Couriers Corners. The line to Sardinia was to be built by the Tonawanda Valley Extension Railroad, which was organized in October of 1880. The company, however, changed their minds and instead built to Arcade, completing the extension by May 1, 1881. They then planned to extend down to Cuba near Olean. This was to be built by the Tonawanda Valley and Cuba Railroad, which was formed on July 14, 1881, to run through Sandusky and Rushford to reach Cuba. On August 27, 1881, the three railroads merged together, becoming simply the Tonawanda Valley and Cuba Railroad, which reached Cuba Hang on. I'm having an issue here. My mouse isn't cooperating. Is that going to work now? Yes. Which reached Cuba on September 4th, 1882, connecting with another narrow gauge line, the Bradford, Eldred, and Cuba, which also was controlled by the Erie Railroad. When September 1884 came, the railroad was defaulting on bonds and entered receivership on November 29, 1884, and then ceased operation of the railroad between Cuba and Sandusky on October 30, 1886. The section from Freedom to Attica was sold to bondholders on January 19, 1891, and in May 1891 it was taken over by the newly formed Attica and Freedom Railroad. This railroad promptly went bankrupt and was sold in April of 1894. The next railroad to inherit the line was the Buffalo, Attica, and Arcade Railroad, which formed on October 13, 1894, and began standard gauging the line, opening Attica to Couriers in January of 1895, and then to Arcade in December of 1895. They then built a 2-mile line from Arcade to the Pennsylvania Railroad at Arcade Junction in December of 1897. In January of 1902, they built to Sandusky, but that August, a flood washed out both of their new connections. The BA&A was sold to the Buffalo and Susquehanna in 1904 and was operated by that railroad until 1913, when it was sold to W.L. Kahn from Pittsburgh, who proceeded to run the railroad into the ground. Operations were suspended during the winter of 1916 to 1917. The lack of railroad service was remedied on May 23, 1917, when the Arcade Attica Railroad was formed by local investors and would remain to the present day under that name. This railroad provided freight and passenger service between Arcade and the southwest corner of Wyoming County and Attica in the center of the northern end of Wyoming County. The southern end in Arcade featured the Arcade Station, the engine house, some side tracks, the Y where the line once went to Cuba, and the line over to Arcade Junction from the Y where the ARA connected with the Pennsylvania Railroad. The northern end was a Y connecting the Arcade and Attica with the Erie Railroad in New York Central at the Attica Station, which served all three railroads until the NYC abandoned their service between Attica and Batavia. Between the two villages, the railroad passed a few passenger stations, which included Java Center, Couriers, and Verysburg. These three remain, but only the Couriers station is currently used. The Verysburg one is privately owned and has been moved off the right-of-way. The Arcade in Attica had its problems, but survived the Great Depression without laying off a single employee, and in 1941 they replaced most steam power with GE 44-ton switcher number 110. That's the Couriers station that's on the screen behind me right now. And then in 1947 acquired the 44-ton number 111 to finish off steam power. Passenger service ended in the Arcade in Attica during 1951 when the Erie stopped providing passenger service through Attica. And in 1957, the ARA was abandoned between North Java and Attica when the line experienced severe washouts during the spring. The trackage was not worth repairing with the declining business north of North Java. The Arcade in Attica became famous nationwide when the Borden Wilk Company opened up with their Arcade facility, which made non-dairy creamer Cremora in the 1960s. The Arcade in Attica, orange and white, then blue and white boxcars traveled the nation shipping Borden's Cremora. They also the Arcade in Attica also delivered raw materials to the Borden Arcade facility, but these shipped product. The Arcade in Attica's next locomotive purchase was in 1988 when they acquired GE 65-ton switcher number 112 from a company in Colorado. This 1945-built locomotive took over as primary power and pushed number 110 into the sidelines. The final locomotive purchase was number 113. This was built in 1959 by GE as a 50-ton. Tracks and dirt. But had 30 more tons of weight added to it, making it an 80-ton switcher. This had previously served Consolidated Edison in Staten Island and arrived in the Arcade in Attica in 2014. Why isn't that? There it goes. It now is the primary power. Arcade in Attica number 110 is on display. That's number 113 in the background. Is now a display piece in the municipal lot and arcade, basically across this street, across from the Arcade station. Number 111 is removed from service and awaits restoration. Number 112 is now backup for number 113. The Arcade in Attica, besides the diesels, owns some antique rolling stock used for storage, which you saw in the beginning of this video on the screen behind me. Their fleet of coaches for tourist operations, the gondola made into an open air car, some older and simple maintenance equipment, and 2 steam locomotives. The steam locomotives are number 14, which is a 1917 built Baldwin 460, which has been out of service for many years. It needed an extensive overhaul to meet regulations when it was pulled from service, but its condition has deteriorated since. Number 18 is a 1920 built Elco 280, which has handled passenger excursions for years, has been out of service since 2018 when it came time for a full rebuild, which is still underway in the Syracuse area. It's expected to be operational for the 2022 season. Sadly, number 14, which is the favorite of those who saw it operating, is not likely to ever run again. Parts have been scrounged from it to keep number 18 running, and it would be an enormous task and cost to get it operational again. The Arcade in Attica also has acquired a tender from the Gettysburg Railway, which will replace the tender that has been used by 18 for years. This is still awaiting overhaul and sits near the engine house. At this time, the Arcade Attica only has one industry, Reisdorf's, outside of North Java, which receives anywhere from 1 to 14 cars a week on average. The locomotive power limits train size to around 8 to 10 cars and then requires both diesels. These GE switchers are not equipped to run in multiple units, and therefore running both requires a 3-man crew, 2 engineers and a conductor. The Borden plant closed in 1970 and is rotting away. The Agway closed, and Arcade Lumber stopped being rail-served. The stations at Arcade and Couriers are painted in the Arcade and Attica orange, while the station in Java Center is gray. The only activity for the railroad there is refueling the diesels. Excursions are seasonal, and are twice a day on Saturday and Sunday, with some extra trips for special occasions from time to time. The first couple weeks in October are other fall excursions. When the steam locomotive is operating, the locomotive runs forward north to Couriers and then runs tender first south. However, on the 100th celebration, the locomotive was turned in the Y to run the opposite way. The Arcade in Attica, there's the Java Center station, is a simple little railroad which would be easy to model, needs little space and only one operator. At least the 44-tonners are available locally from a man who custom paints them and sells them through a local retailer. Now we'll do a minute of looking solely at the screen behind me. There they're refueling. Had to do this handheld. These pictures will eventually be on the Northeast Rail Photography. I haven't gotten them there yet. Some random pictures are up there, but all these cars will be in the That's enough.